You came home.
I promised I'd never leave you to fight alone.
Who is she?
You'll never catch me.
Why am I losing to a kid?
Boss, she's turning us soft. For the first time in years, this house sounds alive.
The most feared man in South Korea stood in a silent courtroom with handcuffs around his wrists, smiling as though he already knew the verdict. Then the doors burst open, and the little black girl everyone had once called worthless walked in wearing a lawyer's robe. Within the next hour, an empire would either crumble into dust or rise stronger than ever, and the truth behind 15 years of lies would leave even the judge speechless. The first time anyone tried to assassinate the boss after he adopted the little girl, they failed because of a bowl of kimchi. Nobody ever believed that story. His men claimed it sounded too ridiculous. His enemies insisted it was propaganda. The boss simply laughed every time someone brought it up. You'd be surprised how many wars begin over pride and end because somebody dropped lunch. No one knew whether he was joking. That was the problem with him. He smiled like a grandfather, negotiated like a businessman, and punished betrayal like an ancient king who had personally invented revenge. His mansion overlooked the Han River, where glass walls reflected the sparkling skyline of Seoul. From the outside, it looked like the home of an ordinary billionaire. Inside, however, every hallway contained hidden security systems, reinforced doors, and enough cameras to make even ghosts feel watched. Yet the strangest thing inside the mansion was neither the weapons nor the bodyguards. It was the sound of laughter. Give it back. No. You cheated. I improvised. You hid under the table. I call it tactical invisibility. The towering enforcer sighed as he crawled beneath an expensive dining table. The little girl burst into unstoppable laughter. You can't catch me. I weigh 130 kilograms, the giant groaned. Why am I chasing someone who still needs a booster seat? Because you lost. I let you win. You've said that 32 times. I counted because you're dramatic. No, she corrected proudly. I'm educated. The entire dining room erupted into laughter. Even the boss, who had spent the morning discussing shipments worth millions of dollars, struggled to keep a straight face. His lieutenant leaned closer. Boss, she's turning us soft. The boss calmly sipped his tea. No. Then why are grown men playing hide-and-seek? Because for the first time in years, he replied quietly, this house sounds alive. Silence followed. Nobody argued. Everyone in that room remembered the years after his wife died. The mansion had once been colder than winter itself. No birthdays. No music. No celebrations. Only business. Only grief. The child had unknowingly done what doctors, priests, and psychologists never could. She had made a broken man laugh again. Days turned into months. Months became years. The little girl refused to become spoiled despite living in unimaginable luxury. Whenever she caught servants cleaning her room, she cleaned with them. Whenever chefs prepared extravagant meals, she secretly packed leftovers into small containers. One afternoon, the boss caught her sneaking toward the gate carrying 3 bags. Planning an escape? She nearly dropped everything. No. Then why are you walking like a criminal carrying stolen treasure? She scratched her head awkwardly. You forgot I employ 600 people trained to notice suspicious behavior. She sighed dramatically. I was taking food to the children under the bridge. The boss looked inside the bags.
Rice. Soup.
Fruit. Fresh bread. Enough food for nearly 20 children. You've been doing this often? She nodded. They remind me of me.
His eyes softened.
Do they know where the food comes from? They think an old grandmother leaves it there. You lied. I protected your reputation. My reputation?
She grinned.
If homeless children hear their food comes from the biggest mafia boss in Korea. She paused. They'll probably check for poison. Even the boss couldn't stop laughing. His bodyguards looked away, pretending not to smile. One muttered quietly, she's dangerous. Another nodded. To our serious image. Far away, someone else wasn't laughing. Inside a luxurious office overlooking Gangnam, several powerful businessmen gathered around a polished black table. One photograph lay in the center.
The child.
A silver-haired executive adjusted his glasses. So, he tapped the picture. This is the weakness. Another man shook his head. Not today. But eventually. No emperor survives loving someone. Across the table, a scarred former captain smiled without humor. I know him. You worked for him. I did. What makes you certain she'll destroy him? The scarred man leaned back. Love makes intelligent men predictable. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Rain hammered against the windows like impatient fingers. The conspiracy had begun. Weeks later, the mansion prepared for the girl's 12th birthday. Decorations filled every hallway. One assassin spent 40 minutes learning how to tie balloons. He failed spectacularly. Another accidentally released 50 balloons into the ceiling. The giant enforcer stared upward. I fought special forces. Nobody answered. I've survived explosions. Still silence. He pointed accusingly at the floating balloons. But these things are evil. The little girl laughed so hard she nearly fell off her chair. The boss watched from across the room. He hadn't celebrated a birthday since losing his family. Now he stood surrounded by hardened criminals arguing over cake flavors. Life truly possessed a twisted sense of humor. As candles flickered, she closed her eyes. What did you wish for? The boss asked. She smiled. If I tell you, it won't come true.
Who told you that?
The internet.
He sighed.
The internet also says cats secretly control the economy. They don't. No, they might. Before anyone could answer, every light inside the mansion suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The laughter stopped. The emergency generators failed. Impossible. Then,
Bang.
a gunshot echoed somewhere outside. Another followed. The giant enforcer instantly pulled the girl behind him. Every bodyguard reached for concealed weapons. The boss remained perfectly still. His voice became frighteningly calm. Everyone stay where you are. Another explosion shook the mansion. Glass shattered upstairs. Security alarms screamed through the darkness. Someone had breached the estate. And hidden somewhere beyond the walls, a traitor smiled. The first bullet tore through the birthday cake before anyone even heard the rifle. White frosting exploded across the table. Candles spun through the air. For one strange second, the giant enforcer stared sadly at the ruined cake. I knew balloons were only the beginning. Nobody laughed. The boss moved first. His voice remained almost unnaturally calm. Phase 7. Within seconds, thick steel shutters slammed over every window. Reinforced doors locked automatically, turning the mansion into a fortress. Hidden lights switched on, bathing every hallway in a deep red glow that made the marble floors resemble rivers of blood. The little girl looked around. I thought the emergency lights would be blue. The boss smiled despite the chaos. I paid extra for red. That's dramatic. I know. Outside, automatic gunfire echoed through the rain. Inside the security control room, dozens of monitors suddenly went black. Then one flickered back to life. A masked man appeared on the screen.
He slowly clapped.
Impressive. The boss folded his arms. You've broken into my home just to applaud? I came to congratulate you. For what? For finally becoming weak. The transmission ended. The screens died again. One lieutenant cursed under his breath. They hacked the surveillance. No, the boss replied. They wanted us to think they hacked it. Every officer in the room looked confused. The little girl tilted her head. So, we're pretending they fooled us while pretending we think they fooled us. The giant enforcer blinked. My brain hurts. The boss nodded.
Good.
Confused people make unpredictable targets. Outside, black SUVs surrounded the estate. More than 50 armed men poured through the gardens. Rain soaked their clothing as they advanced toward the mansion with military precision. One sniper whispered into his radio. Target is inside. Another answered. Orders? No survivors. Inside the mansion, however, panic never arrived. The boss refused to allow fear inside his walls. He calmly picked up a chess piece from a nearby table. The little girl frowned. You're playing chess? No. Then why are you holding it? I think better when I'm annoying people. She rolled her eyes. That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't have to. Suddenly, the floor beneath the entrance exploded upward. Several attackers crashed through a hidden trapdoor they had never noticed. Before they could recover, smoke flooded the hallway. One screamed, "I can't see." Another yelled, "Where are they?" A deep voice answered from somewhere in the darkness. "Behind you." The giant enforcer. 3 attackers turned. Bad decision. Seconds later, they lay unconscious across the marble floor. One groaned, "Why are you so big?" The giant shrugged. "My mother believed in vegetables." Elsewhere inside the mansion, another squad searched room after room. One soldier kicked open a bedroom door. Empty. Another door. Empty. Then they entered the library. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling. The room looked peaceful. Too peaceful. One attacker whispered, "Something feels wrong." Another scoffed, "They're just books." A voice came from above. Exactly. Everyone looked up. The little girl sat comfortably on a rolling ladder nearly 20 feet above the floor. She smiled brightly. "Do you gentlemen enjoy reading?" The attackers raised their weapons. Before anyone fired, she pulled a thick red book. Nothing happened. Then every bookshelf rotated. Secret walls opened. Steel barriers slammed shut behind the intruders. The men found themselves trapped inside a cage built entirely from moving bookshelves. One shouted angrily, "This house is insane."
She grinned.
"I helped design this room." "You designed a prison?" "No, a library." The attackers groaned. Meanwhile, beneath the mansion, the boss entered an underground command center that only 5 people knew existed. Maps covered digital walls. Encrypted communication lines buzzed nonstop. His oldest advisor approached. "We've identified the attackers." "Who sent them?" The old man hesitated. "You won't like the answer." "I rarely do." "A coalition." The boss remained silent. "Business executives." He nodded once. "I expected that." "Corrupt politicians." Another nod. "Foreign investors." No reaction. Then came the final name. And the advisor swallowed. "Someone from inside." The room became completely silent. The boss slowly closed his eyes. "I was wondering how long it would take." "You already suspected?" "I built this empire." He looked toward the ceiling. "Fortresses aren't destroyed from outside. They're opened from within." At that exact moment, another explosion rocked the underground bunker. Emergency lights flickered. A hidden elevator unexpectedly activated by itself. Everyone pointed weapons toward its doors.
Ding.
The elevator opened. No one stood inside. Only a small gift box rested neatly on the floor. The little girl had secretly followed the boss downstairs. She frowned. "A present." One bodyguard stepped forward. "Don't touch it." Too late. The box opened by itself. Instead of a bomb, a small music box began playing a gentle lullaby. The same lullaby the boss's late wife used to sing. His face lost all color. Impossible. No one outside his family should have known that melody. At the bottom of the music box lay a single photograph. It showed his wife moments before the explosion that killed her. Written across the back were 6 chilling words.
She did not die by chance.
Beneath that sentence was another. "Ask the man you trust most." For the first time in 15 years, the ghost of Soul looked genuinely afraid. The words echoed through the underground command center like a whisper from a grave. She did not die by chance. Ask the man you trust most. No one spoke. Even the emergency alarm seemed quieter. The boss held the photograph with hands that had never trembled before. For 15 years, he had believed he buried the truth alongside his wife. Now the truth had quietly walked back into his life, carrying a smile and a knife. The old advisor cleared his throat. "Boss." No answer. "Should we continue the evacuation?"
Still nothing.
The little girl gently tugged at his sleeve. "You always told me that when your emotions get loud, Your decisions become stupid. His eyes slowly met hers. She smiled. So, don't become stupid. A faint smile appeared on his face. You've been listening. I ignore most of your lectures. You just quoted one. I said most. Even surrounded by danger, she somehow found a way to make him breathe again. The giant enforcer scratched his head. I don't understand. Nobody looked at him. I mean, he pointed at the photograph. If somebody wanted to kill the boss, why send clues instead of bullets? The little girl answered before anyone else could. Because bullets end lives. She looked back at the photograph. The truth destroys them. The room fell silent again. The boss carefully placed the photograph inside his coat. Seal every exit. One lieutenant frowned. But shouldn't we escape? The boss shook his head. No, they came here expecting frightened prey. His calm smile slowly returned. They're about to discover they've entered the wolf's den. Outside, rain poured harder than ever. The attackers had captured nearly half the estate. Smoke drifted through shattered gardens where priceless statues now lay broken. Their commander smiled confidently. We're winning. One sniper lowered his rifle. Sir, what? I don't think we are. The commander looked around. What are you talking about? We've been here 30 minutes. So, we've only seen 8 guards. The commander blinked. So, there should be over 100. The smile disappeared. He suddenly realized something horrifying. Where is everyone? Almost on cue, every light across the estate switched back on. The entire mansion glowed brilliantly against the storm. Classical music began playing through hidden outdoor speakers. Mozart. The attackers looked at one another. What kind of psychopath plays classical music during a gunfight? The answer came through every speaker. The boss's calm voice. I apologize for the interruption. Several attackers froze. I normally welcome guests with tea. A pause. But unfortunately, another pause. You arrived carrying assault rifles. The giant enforcer whispered into his radio. He's doing the speech. Every guard smiled. One young bodyguard asked, does he always do speeches? The veteran nodded proudly. He thinks they're motivating. They are. No, but they're entertaining. Across the estate, the boss continued. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender. One attacker laughed. And if we don't? The speakers answered instantly. Then my daughter will say, I gave you a chance. The little girl rolled her eyes. You always blame me. It's good parenting. It isn't. It sounds responsible. The countdown reached 0. Nothing happened. Several attackers laughed. I told you. He was bluffing. Then, the ground shook. Hundreds of small floodlights hidden throughout the gardens activated simultaneously. Every attacker cast 3 different shadows. Motion sensors tracked every movement. Automatic steel barricades emerged from beneath the ground, separating the invaders into isolated groups. One commander screamed. They divided us. Too late. The mansion had become a maze. A trap designed years earlier. One guard chuckled into his radio. Boss calls it gardening. Another laughed. I thought it was landscaping. The giant corrected both. No, he calls it customer service. Deep inside the mansion, however, someone quietly smiled. The traitor. Hidden among loyal guards stood a middle-aged security officer with perfectly pressed clothes and an expression too calm for the situation. He discreetly pressed a button beneath his watch. Somewhere inside the underground command center, a vault door unlocked.
Click.
Nobody heard it. The officer smiled. Almost there. He had served the boss faithfully for 22 years. Or so everyone believed. Meanwhile, the little girl wandered into the library carrying the mysterious music box. Something bothered her. She wounded again. The lullaby played softly. She listened carefully. Again. And again. Finally, she frowned. Wait. She rushed toward the piano. The giant enforcer blinked.
Now.
She ignored him. Her fingers played the melody. Halfway through,
She stopped.
that's wrong. What? The song. It sounds normal. No, she played it again. This note. She pointed at a single key. It doesn't belong. The boss entered quietly. What did you find? She replayed the melody. The composer intentionally changed one note. Why? I don't know. She repeated the sequence. Then suddenly, her eyes widened. It's not music. The boss stared at her. It's a code. Using musical notation, she quickly wrote the notes onto paper, then converted them into letters. Everyone crowded around. Slowly, a hidden message appeared.
Vault.
Midnight. Trust no one wearing silver. The boss instinctively looked around the room. Nearly every senior officer wore black. Only one person consistently wore a silver tie. His oldest advisor, the man who had stood beside him since the beginning. The advisor noticed everyone staring. His face turned pale. I swear. Before he could finish, a gunshot echoed through the hallway. The advisor collapsed. Blood spread across his silver tie. The lights went out once more. And in the darkness, a familiar voice whispered near the boss's ear. You trusted the wrong silver. Then everything became silent. Darkness swallowed the library. For one endless heartbeat, nobody moved. The giant enforcer instinctively stepped in front of the little girl, stretching his massive arms like a human shield. If anybody shoots again, he muttered, please aim higher. I'm already ugly enough. Normally, she would have laughed. Not this time. The smell of gunpowder still hung in the air. The boss slowly crouched beside his oldest advisor. The silver tie was soaked in blood. His breathing was weak but steady. You're alive. The old man forced a painful smile. I've survived your cooking. You've never eaten my cooking. Exactly.
He coughed.
That's why I survived. Even on the edge of death, the old man refused to lose his sense of humor. The boss pressed his hand firmly against the wound. Medical team. No answer. His radio produced only static. They've jammed every frequency, one guard whispered. The little girl knelt beside the advisor. She examined the wound carefully. Don't move him. The giant frowned. He's been shot. I know. So, why aren't we carrying him? She pointed toward the bookshelf. Because whoever fired that bullet expected us to. Everyone looked confused. She continued. The shooter has a second angle. If we move him. She pointed toward the doorway. The next bullet finishes the job. The boss smiled proudly. You noticed. She nodded. The blood pattern. One lieutenant blinked. What blood pattern? She sighed dramatically. You people watch too many action movies. Without another word, she picked up a hardcover law book from the shelf. Sorry. She looked at the title. I hope justice forgives me. She tossed it through the doorway.
Bang.
Another sniper round ripped through the book. Paper exploded everywhere. The giant stared in amazement. That book just got a shorter edition. The boss looked toward the doorway. There. A tiny flash reflected from a distant rooftop. He whispered into his watch. Window 12. Somewhere outside. One hidden sniper calmly adjusted his scope. Before he could fire again, a suppressed rifle cracked from another building. His own bodyguard sniper had been waiting all along. The enemy's sniper collapsed instantly. The boss quietly stood. Now we move. Meanwhile, across the estate, the traitor calmly walked through the chaos. Nobody questioned him. Why would they? He had protected the boss for over 2 decades. He knew every security code, every hidden passage, every emergency protocol. He also knew exactly where the underground vault was located. He smiled to himself. Almost finished. As he reached a narrow hallway, a small voice echoed behind him. Going somewhere? He froze. The little girl stood at the end of the corridor, holding a flashlight. Her expression wasn't angry. It was curious. You forgot your silver tie. The man slowly turned. His smile never disappeared. You're smarter than you should be. She shrugged. I read. You should have played with dolls. I tried. And they were boring. The traitor chuckled. I almost feel guilty. Almost. He slowly reached inside his jacket. The giant enforcer immediately appeared from another hallway. So, he cracked his enormous knuckles. We're fighting now. The traitor looked at the giant. I've always wondered. What? Do they feed you concrete? The giant grinned. No, my grandmother. Without warning, the traitor pulled a pistol.
Bang.
The giant threw himself sideways. The bullet shattered a marble pillar. Before the traitor could fire again, the little girl grabbed a decorative umbrella stand. She swung it with surprising force.
Clang.
The metal stand smashed against his wrist. The pistol flew across the hallway. The giant blinked. Nice swing. She smiled. I played baseball for 3 months. You quit. I was too good. You struck out every game. I was strategically inconsistent. The giant laughed despite himself. The traitor, however, did not. He suddenly sprinted down another corridor. After him, the chase exploded through the mansion. Guards raced through hallways. Doors slammed open. Portraits shook against the walls. The traitor knew every shortcut. He disappeared through a hidden bookshelf. The giant stopped. I hate secret doors. The little girl examined the shelf. No, what? He wants us to follow. Obviously. So we won't. The boss appeared behind them. Correct. He looked at the bookshelf. What would you do if you wanted everyone chasing you? The little girl answered immediately. I'd leave the obvious escape route. And the real one? I'd make it boring. She looked around, then smiled. There. She pointed toward a simple maintenance closet. The giant frowned. The broom closet? No one suspects the broom closet. He opened it. Inside, another hidden elevator. The boss chuckled softly. I really need to stop underestimating you. She looked offended. You still underestimate me? Occasionally. Rude. I raised you. So, I earned the right. She laughed. You definitely didn't. The elevator descended deep beneath the estate. Lower, lower, then finally stopped. The doors opened. An enormous underground vault stretched before them. Gold,
Cash.
documents, ancient artifacts, hard drives, generations of secrets. But none of those captured their attention. At the center of the vault, the traitor stood smiling. Beside him was a woman in her 60s wearing a gray coat. The boss stared in disbelief. His face lost all expression. No, the old woman smiled sadly. It's been a long time. The little girl looked between them. You know her? The boss barely whispered. She, his voice cracked for the first time in 15 years, was my wife's sister. Silence. The woman slowly nodded. Yes. And everything you've believed about that explosion, she looked directly into his eyes, was a lie. The traitor smiled wider. Welcome to the real beginning. The vault felt colder than the winter night above. Not because of the concrete walls, not because of the steel doors weighing several tons, but because the man who had never feared another human being suddenly found himself staring into the face of his own past. The woman folded her hands quietly. I wondered whether you would recognize me. The boss answered without taking his eyes off her. I buried you. She smiled sadly. No, you buried a lie. The little girl looked from one face to another. Somebody should explain before my brain files a complaint. Even now, the giant enforcer nodded in agreement. I second that. The boss ignored both of them. You attended the funeral. I did. You cried. I wasn't pretending. Then explain. The woman slowly walked forward. My sister knew they were coming. Silence. She discovered someone inside your organization had sold information. The boss frowned. Impossible. Is it? The traitor chuckled. Boss. He slowly clapped. You've always been brilliant. A pause. But brilliance has one weakness. It believes it sees everything. The woman continued. Your wife begged me to leave the city with her. Why didn't you tell me? Because she didn't trust anyone. Another painful silence. Not even you. The words landed harder than any punch. The boss closed his eyes. His wife, the one person he loved most, had died believing someone close to him wanted him dead. The little girl quietly stepped beside him.
She didn't speak.
She simply stood there. Sometimes silence comforts better than words. The traitor smiled. Touching. The giant glared. I liked you better when you weren't talking. I've always talked. I just wasn't listening. The woman slowly removed a faded envelope from inside her coat. I kept this hidden for 15 years. She handed it to the boss. His fingers hesitated. Inside, a handwritten letter. His wife's handwriting. He recognized it instantly. His breathing became uneven. He unfolded the paper. My love, if you're reading this, then I failed. Please don't spend your life hunting ghosts. The enemy isn't the one pointing the gun. The enemy is the one opening the door. Protect our family. Protect yourself. And if we ever have children, tell them I loved them before they ever took their first breath. The boss lowered the letter. For the first time since becoming the ghost of Soul, tears rolled down his face. Nobody looked away. The little girl gently held his hand. You don't have to hide it, he whispered. I promised her I'd keep everyone safe. You kept me safe. He looked toward her. You were never my responsibility. She smiled through her own tears. I know. I became your daughter. The giant discreetly wiped his eyes. I'm allergic. Nobody believed him. I'm serious. No, the little girl laughed. You're emotional. I refuse to admit that. You already did. The touching moment ended with applause. Slow, mocking, cruel. The traitor smiled. Beautiful. He reached into his pocket. You know what ruins emotional reunions? The giant sighed.
What?
Explosives. He pressed a small remote. Nothing happened. He frowned. Pressed it again. Still nothing. His smile disappeared. What? The little girl pulled another remote from her pocket. You mean this? The giant burst into laughter. You stole his remote? She shrugged proudly. When he was pretending to surrender upstairs. The traitor blinked. You pickpocket me? I used to live on the streets. She tossed the remote into the air. Cute trick. The giant caught it effortlessly, then accidentally squeezed too hard.
Crunch.
Plastic shattered. Everyone stared. He looked embarrassed. I forget my own strength. The little girl sighed dramatically. That was evidence. It was fragile evidence. It was still evidence. Sorry. The boss couldn't help smiling. Even surrounded by betrayal, his strange family somehow remained exactly that. Family. The traitor slowly backed toward the vault door. You think you've won? No, the boss calmly folded the letter. I think you're running. The traitor laughed. I'm surviving. You betrayed everyone. I invested wisely. You murdered innocent people. They were obstacles. You destroyed families. They weren't mine. The boss nodded slowly. Then you truly learned nothing from me. The traitor frowned. I learned everything. No, the boss stepped forward. You learned fear. I taught loyalty. The traitor suddenly pulled a hidden knife. He lunged.
Fast.
Much faster than anyone expected. Straight toward the little girl. The boss moved instantly. He shoved her aside. The blade slashed across his shoulder. Blood splashed onto the vault floor. The giant roared. He tackled the traitor like a freight train. Both men crashed through a display case filled with ancient swords. Glass exploded everywhere. The fight became brutal. Punches, elbows, broken marble. The traitor fought like a desperate animal. The giant fought like an avalanche. Finally, with one devastating blow, the giant sent him crashing against the enormous vault door. The steel echoed throughout the chamber. The traitor collapsed, breathing, barely conscious. The giant rubbed his sore hand. I warned him. No, you didn't, the little girl said. I warned him in my heart. She laughed. That doesn't count. It counts to me. Suddenly, a quiet voice echoed from the vault entrance. Enough. Everyone turned. More than 50 armed officers flooded into the underground chamber. At their center stood the nation's chief prosecutor. His expression was cold. He looked directly at the boss. This ends tonight. The traitor, lying on the floor, slowly smiled through bloody teeth. You fools. The prosecutor ignored him.
He pointed at the boss.
You are under arrest for organized crime, corruption, money laundering, conspiracy, and multiple counts of murder. The little girl stepped forward instinctively. You can't. The boss gently raised one hand, stopping her. He looked calmly at the prosecutor. I'll come peacefully. The prosecutor nodded. Wise decision. As officers placed handcuffs around the boss's wrists, the little girl noticed something strange. The prosecutor wasn't looking at the boss. He was looking at the mysterious envelope containing the letter. And he was smiling. A smile that said only one thing. He hadn't come for justice. He had come to bury the truth. The real battle would not be fought with bullets. It would be fought in a courtroom. 3 months later, the cameras arrived before the judges did. News vans crowded every street surrounding the Seoul Central District Court. Reporters pushed against security barriers, shouting questions that no one inside intended to answer. Helicopters circled overhead. Every television station in the country carried the trial live. Some called it the trial of the century. Others called it the fall of the ghost of Seoul. His enemies called it justice. His loyal followers called it betrayal. Only the boss called it Tuesday. As prison officers escorted him from the armored transport, hundreds of camera flashes lit up the gray morning sky. One reporter shouted, "Do you finally admit your empire is over?" The boss glanced toward him. I've seen milk expire with more confidence than your prediction. Several journalists burst into laughter. Even a few police officers struggled to hide their smiles. Another reporter yelled, "Are you afraid of spending the rest of your life in prison?" The boss calmly adjusted his jacket despite the handcuffs. I'm more afraid of prison food. You could die in there. I've tasted cafeteria noodles. A pause. I've already faced worse. The internet exploded within seconds. Even people who hated him admitted one thing. The old man had nerves made of steel. Inside Courtroom 9, the atmosphere was completely different. No laughter. No jokes. Only silence. The courtroom overflowed with politicians, wealthy executives, foreign investors, detectives, journalists, and ordinary citizens desperate to witness history. Hidden among them sat the woman who had revealed the truth about the boss's wife. She kept her head lowered. The giant enforcer sat nearby, wearing an uncomfortable suit. He tugged at the collar every few seconds. I miss body armor. One loyal guard whispered, "You look respectable." I look suffocated. That's called a tie. It feels like punishment. Across the aisle, the scarred former captain smiled confidently. Everything was going exactly according to plan. The boss had been isolated. His assets had been frozen. His businesses were collapsing. His allies had disappeared. Victory seemed certain. The chief prosecutor entered the courtroom carrying 6 thick boxes of evidence. He smiled proudly. Ladies and gentlemen, he placed one box after another on the prosecution table. Today we end 15 years of organized crime. The audience applauded. The judge struck the bench. Order. Silence returned. The prosecutor continued confidently. The defendant built his fortune through violence, bribery, murder, and intimidation. He lifted photographs, financial records, weapons, witness statements. Everything appeared devastating. The giant quietly leaned toward one guard. That looks bad. It is bad. Did we actually do all that? The guard shrugged. I honestly don't know anymore. The boss never interrupted. He simply listened. His expression never changed. That calmness irritated the prosecutor more than shouting ever could. Finally, he pointed directly toward the defendant. Do you deny these charges? The boss stood slowly. I deny the lies. Do you deny operating a criminal organization? I operated many organizations. The courtroom murmured. But criminal? He smiled faintly. That depends on who's writing history. The prosecutor laughed sarcastically. You still believe you're untouchable. No, you think someone will save you? The boss looked toward the courtroom entrance. Actually, his voice remained calm. I know she will. The prosecutor frowned. She? Before anyone could ask another question, the massive courtroom doors opened. Every head turned.
Click, click, click.
The sound of elegant heels echoed across the marble floor. A young black woman entered wearing a perfectly tailored black lawyer's robe. She walked with quiet confidence. No hesitation. No fear. The same little girl who once slept beneath bridges now carried herself with the dignity of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. The courtroom stared. Reporters scrambled to identify her. The giant smiled proudly. I remember when she thought broccoli was government punishment. One guard whispered, "Please don't say that out loud." Too late. Several reporters heard him. The young woman stopped beside the defense table. She bowed respectfully toward the judge. Then, she turned toward the boss. For a moment, neither of them spoke. 15 years disappeared between them. He no longer saw the brilliant lawyer. He saw the hungry child holding stale bread for a stray dog. She no longer saw the feared mafia boss. She saw the man who had simply asked,
"Come home."
He smiled. "You grew up." She smiled back. "You grew old." A few people laughed. The tension eased for exactly 2 seconds. Then she faced the judge. "Your Honor." Her voice carried through the courtroom with remarkable confidence. "My name is Attorney Nyla. I represent the defense." The prosecutor smirked. A touching family reunion. He opened another evidence file. "It changes nothing." Nyla calmly placed a single envelope on the defense table. "I disagree." The prosecutor glanced at it dismissively. "One letter?" She nodded. "One truth." The prosecutor laughed loudly enough for the courtroom to hear. "You expect one piece of paper to destroy 15 years of investigation?" Nyla smiled. "No," she looked directly into his eyes. "I expect your own lies to do that." The room fell silent. She slowly picked up the envelope containing the handwritten letter. "Before this trial continues," she looked toward the judge. "The defense requests permission to introduce newly discovered evidence connected to the murder of the defendant's wife." The prosecutor's confident smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked nervous. Nyla noticed. She smiled ever so slightly. Then she turned toward the audience. "If you believe evil should always win because it wears an expensive suit or carries political power, then today's evidence won't matter to you. But if you believe no lie should outlive the truth, stay with us, because what you're about to hear will expose people far more dangerous than the man sitting at this table." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Attorney Nyla," he looked at the envelope. "You may proceed." The prosecutor suddenly stood. "Objection." But the fear in his voice had already revealed exactly what Nyla needed to know. The hunter had just become the hunted. The courthouse trembled as dust rained from the ceiling. People screamed. Court officers rushed toward every exit. Journalists dug beneath desks, protecting cameras before protecting themselves. One cameraman shouted, "If I survive this, I'm charging extra." Even in disaster, somebody always found a way to negotiate. The explosion had not destroyed the courtroom. It had sealed it. Steel security shutters dropped over every entrance. The chief prosecutor smiled. "You still don't understand." Nyla remained perfectly calm. "No," she looked around the room. "I understand exactly what's happening." The prosecutor laughed. "You think this is my plan?" "I know it isn't." The smile slowly disappeared from his face. She stepped toward the center of the courtroom. "You're afraid." "I fear nothing." "No," she pointed toward the sealed courtroom doors. "You're terrified." He swallowed. "The person outside doesn't lock witnesses inside." A pause. "They lock loose ends inside." For the first time, panic appeared in the prosecutor's eyes. The judge noticed. "So, you're not the mastermind." The prosecutor looked toward the ceiling. "He'll kill all of us." Almost on cue, every television screen inside the courtroom flickered to life. A single figure appeared. An elderly businessman with silver hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. No mask, no disguise, only confidence.
The courtroom gasped.
Nearly every billionaire, politician, and executive in the room recognized him instantly. He smiled into the camera. "For 20 years," he began calmly, "you all believed governments ruled nations." He laughed softly. "What an adorable fantasy." Silence filled the courtroom. Politicians come and go. Judges retire. Presidents lose elections. But money. He adjusted his cufflinks. Never resigns. Nyla stared at the screen. So, you're finally introducing yourself. He smiled. You must be the little girl. I prefer Attorney Nyla. Titles don't impress me. They don't need to. She folded her arms. Truth usually does. The businessman chuckled. You remind me of your father. She shook her head. I remind people of the man who chose me. The boss quietly smiled. His daughter had just given him the greatest honor of his life. The businessman sighed. Sentimental. He pressed a button somewhere off-screen. The courthouse will self-destruct in 6 minutes. The courtroom erupted. People screamed. Security officers rushed toward locked exits. Nothing moved. The businessman continued. I built the conspiracy that destroyed your wife. He looked directly at the boss. I needed a monster. You became one. I needed corrupt prosecutors. They served me. I needed politicians. They obeyed. I needed fear. You supplied it. The boss calmly stood. You also made one mistake. The businessman smiled. Did I? You underestimated one hungry little girl. Nyla smiled. He still says that. I still mean it. The businessman laughed loudly. Do you think exposing me matters? He leaned toward the camera. My accounts are hidden. My companies are protected. My influence spans continents. You cannot destroy what you cannot find. Nyla slowly lifted a small flash drive. I disagree. His smile vanished. She continued. While everyone watched the trial, she held it between 2 fingers. Someone accessed your private offshore servers. The businessman frowned. Impossible. She looked toward the giant enforcer. He scratched his head awkwardly. I may have accidentally carried your chief accountant into our investigation. The accountant, sitting in police custody behind the courtroom gallery, raised one hand. I cooperated immediately. The giant smiled proudly. He scares easily. I do, the accountant admitted. Nyla turned back to the screen. Every financial transaction, every assassination payment, every politician, every judge, every prosecutor, every shell company. She placed the drive on the evidence table. Already transmitted. The businessman froze. To whom? She smiled. Everyone. At that exact moment, every journalist's phone vibrated. Breaking news alerts flooded across the world. Governments, international investigators, financial crime agencies, global media. His entire empire had gone public. The businessman staggered backward. No, Nyla nodded. You spent 20 years hiding behind secrets. She smiled gently. I spent 15 years studying how secrets die. Outside the courthouse, sirens echoed from every direction. Hundreds of police vehicles surrounded buildings connected to the conspiracy. Executives were arrested in their offices. Politicians were handcuffed during live interviews. Private jets were grounded. Bank accounts froze by the second. The invisible empire collapsed faster than anyone believed possible. Inside the courtroom, the businessman looked into the camera one final time. You've destroyed everything. The boss answered quietly. No, you did. The screen went black. Moments later, bomb disposal officers finally forced open the courthouse doors. The explosion had been a bluff. The mastermind had wanted panic. Instead, he had witnessed his own downfall. Weeks later, every charge against the boss related to the fabricated conspiracy was dismissed. His legitimate businesses were restored, while his criminal network was dismantled by his own order. Standing on the courthouse steps, he announced that the empire built on fear would never return. I spent years believing power protected people, he said. I was wrong. Justice does. The giant enforcer whispered to Nyla. So, does this mean I need a real job? She laughed. You've always had one. What? Professional appetite. I accept that. Months later, children filled the once feared mansion. Its underground vault became a charitable foundation. The training rooms became classrooms. The library became one of Seoul's largest free learning centers. Every child who entered received the same promise once given to one lonely little girl. Come home. On the opening day, Nyla stood beside the boss overlooking the Han River. You know, she said softly, people still call you the ghost of Seoul. He smiled. Ghosts belong to the past. What are you now? He watched dozens of children laughing in the gardens where armed guards once stood. A father. She slipped her arm through his. You always were. For a long moment, neither spoke. The city glittered beneath the evening sky. The empire had fallen. The family had survived. And 15 years after one frightened, homeless black girl accepted the hand of the most feared man in Korea, she kept the promise she never had to speak aloud. She saved not only his empire, she saved his soul.